Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services, Talking Business, our interview series, talking with leaders in the field of digital marketing, banking, insurance, customer service, and business education, all to highlight our great team at CBSI. We're based in Harrison, New York. We provide insurance-backed benefits to the credit card industry. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to talk a little bit about something that's a big change in college athletics, and that's called name, image, and likeness, which started over the summer due to some legal rulings and is evolving, and provides an opportunity for college athletes to earn income off of their name, image, and likeness on social media accounts and other means. And to explain a little bit of the background of that to us, we are very pleased to have an attorney from the firm of Kelley Drye Warren in Washington, D.C., and that is Gonzalo Mon. Gonzalo, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Ken. How are you?
Good, good. Now, Gonzalo, first off, tell us a little bit about the background of your law firm. We've worked with them on marketing legal issues. Tell us a little bit about Kelley Drye and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, first of all, Ken, thanks for having me on to talk about this interesting topic. It's a new topic and it's changing quite a bit, so it's a good time to sort of lay the groundwork on it. I work at Kelley Drye. It's a law firm based in New York. I'm in their DC office, but we have offices across the country. We cover a number of different areas, but I am in their advertising law group. And for about 20 years or so, I've been helping companies with all aspects of promoting their brands. Part of that involves looking at their ads and trying to make sure that the ads are truthful, that they say what they need to say. But part of it's also been behind the scenes agreements. So pertinent to our discussion, I've worked on a lot of sponsorship and endorsement agreements. And over the years, traditionally, that's been with a lot of what we call A-list celebrities. So your actors, your musicians, and your professional athletes. In recent years, a lot of that has shifted online to what's commonly called as influencers. So they may not be household names in the same way a professional athlete might be, but they have large followings on the internet. And as you mentioned, up until recently, student athletes couldn't engage in these sorts of activities. But with the new NCAA ruling, we certainly do expect that a lot of student athletes are going to join the growing ranks of influencers.
Very good. Now, you wrote an article on this recently. Changed NCAA policy creates new group of influencers, and you chronicled what some of the impact of this. First, just tell us the background. How did this start? It seemed like it started with the Ed O'Bannon case, where athletes sued to have their to be compensated for use of their name and likeness on video games, and then it evolved into a couple of cases and rulings this summer. Tell us a little bit about the background, if you would.
Yeah, student athletes have been pushing for this for a long time. They have felt that they've sort of been an unfair playing field compared to professional athletes, for example. So we've known that there's a potential out there for them to make money the same way that professional athletes would. So we've seen a slow push over the years, and as you mentioned, there was a Supreme Court case this summer where the Supreme Court found that a lot of the NCAA policies in this area had been unlawful. So at the same time, we started to see some states passing laws. California, I think, was the first, although it has a clock and it hasn't started yet. But states have started to put pressure and say, look, if you guys don't change this, we're going to make some changes on our own. So we see, I think, about 20 states now have enacted laws, and then there's some that are still going to come online. But that's sort of the background. The past couple of months, we've seen sort of a snowball effect with more states getting on board, more schools weighing in, and now more student athletes talking about their opportunities.
Yes. Now, maybe taking it from the perspective of a company that may want to get involved with this. Certainly, companies are sponsoring NCAA events, individual events for schools and athletic departments, games, broadcasts. What are some of the things for a company to think about if they were interested in sponsoring a student athlete through name, image, and likeness?
Sure, there's a lot to talk about there. Let me start with the NCAA's announcement. One of the things they said is that individuals can engage in these activities as long as they're consistent with the laws of the state in which the school is located. So again, we've got about 20 something and then a few more coming online, but that's the first step. So if a company is looking to engage with an athlete, they need to take a look at those laws. They're generally fairly permissive, but there are differences, and there's some regulations that they will have to think about. So for example, some of these laws would prohibit a student athlete from entering into a deal that conflicts with the school's deal. So let's say a school has an endorsement deal with Nike, a student athlete at that school might not be able to enter into an endorsement deal with Adidas. So again, companies should first look at the state laws. Then they're going to have to look at the school restrictions, and some schools have restrictions in this area as well. Some of it, for example, may be that you can't enter into deals with brands or industries that we think may harm our reputation. Maybe it's gambling or tobacco. So that's a second layer of things to look at. Beyond that, though, and we were talking about this a little bit before, one of the key issues that we've seen with influencers, apart from student athletes, is the concept that an influencer has to disclose his or her connection to the brand they're promoting. So, for example, if you were to read a review of a hotel room, you were looking to stay someplace, you'd probably care to know whether that review was written by someone who just stayed at the hotel and liked it, or whether it was written by someone who was paid to write the review. So the same principles apply in the influencer space. If an influencer, student athlete, anyone is promoting a brand, people should know whether it's just they independently like that brand or they've got a relationship. So we have seen a lot of attention in this area, particularly at the federal level from the Federal Trade Commission, that has scrutinized a number of influencer campaigns. If you look back over the course of the past 10 years or so, some of the first investigations involved instances in which disclosures weren't made at all, and companies weren't telling the influencers to make the disclosures. Now, most companies know to do that, but we're seeing more of a sharper focus from the FTC. So not only did you make the disclosure, but did you use the right words? Did you put it in the right place? Are the companies monitoring? So I think, broadly speaking, that's the first sort of issue that I think brands need to worry about, because that's where we've seen the most attention. If I can throw another one out there that I think we're going to see more activity. If you think about it, when a brand advertises its products, they are subject to certain laws, right? They have to make sure that what they say about their products is truthful, that if they're not misleading, sometimes they may be required to make certain disclosures. That applies to a brand ad, but it's also going to apply if a brand engages an influencer to talk on its behalf. And we've seen some activity in this area, right? Influencers don't say things that are exactly correct, or they don't make the disclosures that they're legally required to do. And we've seen some brands get in trouble for that. So brands really need to think of this as an extension of their other advertising campaigns and really understand that the same rules apply. So they need to have procedures in place to make sure that they do comply.
Now, there's certainly been some companies that have signed up athletes to participate in name, image, and likeness campaigns, and then are offering advertising promotional opportunities to brands that want to participate. How do you see that working? Are there any concerns in that process of athletes signing up with promotional firms?
In terms of the brands or the athletes, both?
Really, it seems like it grew very quickly, and as you said, now you've got regulators taking a look at it. Are there concerns, or is it simply that a brand should really start by talking to the school that an athlete is a student at?
Yeah, so the brands, again, we'll first have to start looking at the laws just to understand the initial boundaries, and then look at the school's policies in place, because it doesn't benefit anyone to start a negotiation only later to find out that, oh, this is prohibited by the state law or it's prohibited by the school's policies. So I think brands should do some due diligence before engaging an athlete. I mentioned, for example, that some schools or states would prohibit certain types of deals, like a tobacco deal or an alcohol deal. So if you're a company in that space, before engaging an athlete, certainly you should take a look and try to make sure that what you're doing is even within the realm of possibility before you start the negotiations. Some of that, I think, the schools are going to have to step in, and this is new for them, right? And I think some schools are doing a better job than others, but they are putting policies out there so that it's clear for the student athletes and it's clear for the brands that are trying to engage them as to what the process should be. I mentioned, for example, that some schools reserve the right to review the contracts to make sure that there isn't anything conflicting. So it's going to be dependent on schools, I think, to have clear procedures in place. Here's how you have to submit the contract to us. Here's our process for reviewing it. And brands are going to have to keep that in mind. It's not just you and the athlete or you and the athlete's agent anymore. There's another party that has to weigh in too, and that has to be built into all the timelines. So brands are going to have to think about that, especially if they have a campaign that they want to start before the next season or before a certain game. There are other boxes that are going to have to be checked in this process.
And certainly the whole process is in flux. As you said, state laws are coming on the books as the year goes by, and you now have the Federal Trade Commission looking at this. Where do you see this going over the next 6 to 12 months? Obviously, the NCAA is looking at its charter right now, and you have a lot of proposed changes and realignment, especially among the Power Five, as it's called, schools. Where do you see name, image, and likeness regulation laws going over the next 6 to 12 months?
It's a timely question. Just yesterday, NCAA president spoke before a House subcommittee on this issue, and he requested that Congress pass a federal law in this area, which might make some sense. I think his concern is you have a patchwork of state laws. Some are going to be more beneficial for student athletes than others, and that might shift where a student athlete wants to go to school. For example, if the schools or the laws in one state are going to allow the athlete to earn more money, he or she may pick that school versus another school. So I think that's a big question as to whether or not the federal government is going to pass a law there. As we've seen over the past couple of years, though, getting the federal government to agree on certain issues is not always easy. So I don't know that this is going to be a priority, but hopefully we move in that direction so that there's some uniformity. I mentioned the Federal Trade Commission. The principles that I talked about are based on a document they have that's commonly called their endorsement guides. Those came out about 10 years ago. FTC reviews them every 10 years, so we're due for an update in that area. It could happen as early as this year. We'll only have a couple months left, if not maybe early next year. So I do expect to see some evolving guidance there. I don't think it's going to dramatically change the landscape, but as you can imagine, a lot has happened in 10 years and there's a lot of gray areas. So we probably do expect to see the FTC add some clarity. In some cases, that clarity may be good, and brands may like that the confusion is cleared up. In some cases, they may not, right? They may add clarity in a way that they think is a little bit harder for them. So I do suspect we're going to see some changes in both of those areas.
And certainly, we study preemption in laws as a big discussion now on data privacy that we're following, trying to get a federal law on data privacy. But it sounds like this whole issue is so much in flux. Where does this work, do you see? We know that prominent college football players, say quarterbacks, a few others, And I think in basketball, you're going to see a few prominent players where a couple of players make a difference, draw attention. There have been some women athletes that have developed followings on social media that may be able to monetize that. Where do you see this working? What do you see as kind of an appropriate direction that benefits the athletes in name, image, and likeness?
Yeah, so to a certain extent, this isn't different than what we see with influencers in other spaces, right? And you look at your movie stars, you're always going to have some that earn more money than others. You look at your professional athletes, and what your Michael Jordans of the world can command. It might be different than what some of your other entry-level athletes who don't have the same record can command. So I think we're going to see the same sort of thing in colleges. So certainly the big stars are going to have more opportunities than the others. That said, one of the things that's sort of interesting in this area, I have worked on deals that range from multi-million dollars to deals that are a few $1,000s. So there's a lot of room in this area. And yeah, the only a small number of student athletes are going to command the big dollars in this area. But I think that there's room for others too. So this isn't an all or nothing. So maybe you're not getting a big high dollar deal, but some companies are willing to pay a few $1,000s for a student athlete, for example. You gave this example, to put on their shoes or their other clothing or promote their brand on Instagram. So I think brands have a little bit of flexibility to experiment at the lower levels and see how that goes. Sometimes it's not just the student athlete's performance, right? Maybe they've got other charisma that they bring to the table. And a campaign that started as, hey, we're going to give you a few $1,000s, wear our product, talk about it on Instagram, goes viral, and you get a lot of eyes on it. Those students may have other opportunities. So bottom line, undoubtedly, some are going to make a lot more money than others, but I think there's opportunity for a lot of athletes to make at least a little bit of money.
Yeah, that's what I kind of see, because you have the majority of college athletic teams and athletes play at outside of the Power 5 leagues, certainly, Division II, Division III, dozens of sports being participated in, men's and women's. What do you see how do you see this working in smaller towns, smaller colleges, for athletes to benefit? I have a feeling marketing classes are all spending time working on what are name, image, and likeness campaigns, and trying it out live. How do you see this working in kind of the smaller college environment, or for teams that don't command television appearances?
Yeah, so again, I think part of the benefit in this area is for a brand, and ultimately for the student athletes, is that brands don't have to invest big for this to work, right? They can try things out on a smaller scale. So I do suspect we'll see some more experimentation. Traditionally, what we've seen is more, or at least in recent years, more of these online influencer campaigns. But in smaller college towns, we may see some more personal appearances, meet and greets. I was reading about a quarterback in Oklahoma, for example, signing autographs and posing for pictures. So if the internet audience is smaller or it's more limited, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more local in-person events. Of course, as brands are dealing with this with the student athletes, they should be mindful of things like an academic schedule, a practice schedule. Sometimes they don't think about that with other influencers who are doing everything online and can film a video at any time of the day and then post it. For these live appearances and other things, brands are going to have to be a little bit more cognizant, right? They want to make sure that they're not impinging too much on the student athlete's ability to practice or to study, which is what they're there to do in college.
And you mentioned appearances. There's been discussion of summer camps for sports where an athlete might get paid instead of one where they might have volunteered in the past to coach, or autograph signings and the like, appearances at retail stores, perhaps like professional athletes commonly do. What again is the process? Is it simply that a store, could be a local store, could be a national brand, would want to contact the school and coordinate with the school? And then how do they do the paperwork? Is it just doing a contract with the individual athlete?
Yep, they could do the contract with the individual athlete, although some of the bigger ones, especially when they're commanding higher dollars, are maybe engaging agents, in which case the brand may have to be dealing with the agent. And I suspect we are going to see some of these athletes engaging with agents who might be able to advise them on, here's what we think is a fair price for this sort of deal. Here's what we're seeing in the market, or here's what terms we think should be in the agreement. But yeah, the brands are going to, again, check the state laws, check the school policies, and then approach the athlete or the agency. And there's, a lot of things that go into these contracts that we can talk about, but schools, brands are going to want to make sure that the athletes understand what their requirements are and be very careful about what triggers the payments. There are some things that are off limits. For example, under these laws, a brand can't say, hey, we're going to pay you if you score 10 touchdowns this season. So it can't be contingent on performance. So there are boundaries that brands are going to have to take into account.
That's a very good point. Now, we're very pleased to talk with Gonzalo Mon, who is advertising attorney at Kelley Drye Warren, very prominent law firm we've worked with in the direct marketing industry. And Gonzalo, just tell us a little bit about your background and your practice.
Yeah, so I've been with the firm for about 20 years, which is a long run. And over the course of those years, I've always been in the advertising group. A core part of the practice involves counseling clients on what they can and can't say in their ads. As I mentioned, I also work on a lot of the transactions, so endorsement deals with celebrities, sponsorship deals with sports teams and other venues. A part of my practice is also contested matters. So perhaps a client thinks that their competitors' ads are misleading. I've helped clients challenge them. And on the flip side of it, I've also defended clients when they have been challenged as well. As you alluded to earlier with your conversation about privacy is becoming a bigger issue. So I help companies spot some of those issues, and I'm very fortunate to be working with a team of people who work on privacy pretty much 24/7 and are staying on top of these developments.